Hi everyone, this is Sean Ismail from the Cloud Ranger, and you are viewing the Microsoft Azure training. Today is the part 7 of Azure websites, and I'm going to talk about Azure Traffic Manager. It's a very interesting topic, and it's one of the cool things that's available as a network service in Azure. So let's get started. So what is Azure Traffic Manager? I just want to go through these 3 points. These are like kind of what Microsoft tells about the Azure Traffic Manager, and then I'm going to translate this and try to make sense of it all. So what Azure Traffic Manager is that it controls the distribution of user traffic to specified endpoints. So if there is a user traffic by and a user trying to go to a website, it controls how the traffic is going to be distributed to different endpoints. Here, endpoints being, for example, to websites. Okay, then it improves availability, performance, and provides load balance of traffic. And this is what Azure Traffic Manager in general is. It's a load balancer, an external load balancer for Azure traffic, which are directed to specific Azure resources. And the way Azure Traffic Manager does this load balancing or controlling the distribution of user traffic is through a policy engine to DNS queries. So this is really a DNS thing where your traffic is routed to different endpoints. So let's translate these 3 points and try to make sense of what it is. Technically, this is the Azure Traffic Manager, and this is situated in the Azure cloud. And when an user, for example, wants to go to rangerweb.cloudranger.net, what will happen is it's going to go hit the traffic manager, and the traffic manager will sort of decide which endpoint, here the endpoint is a website, which endpoint it has to send to. The reason it's called endpoint is because it could be an Azure website or web app, or it could even be a cloud service. So looking at this diagram, what I can tell you is that this is a website, and this is also the same website. Think of these two websites being the same website, but two of them on two separate servers. So when the user goes to rangerweb.cloudranger.net, the traffic manager, which is acting as a load balancer, will figure out, should I send traffic to this server or this server? As far as the user is concerned, it's transparent because it doesn't matter which server the user ends up going to. He or she is going to be completely oblivious that some sort of load balancing is happening because regardless of the server, the content is always going to be the same. But of course, and you probably already know this, there are a lot of benefits of this, right? Because now you're improving availability, performance, and everything else that comes with a load balancer's, the usage of a load balancer. So if for any reason this server goes down, the user will still be able to go here. Or if the user, I mean, there are like thousands of users and you think that one server is not going to be enough, it's going to probably send you, load balance the traffic and send you to both servers. I'm trying to very grossly generalize and make it look like something more simple, but there's a lot going on in the traffic manager, and we'll be going in the next steps in the next slide through all of that. But for now, just think that it's a very glorified load balancer, and we'll get into details on how it's doing the load balancing. So traffic manager, it's not doing like traffic shaping or anything like that. Somebody actually asked me that question. Was it doing any traffic shaping, like looking and doing packet analysis and all that? No, it's basically a load balancer. Okay, so let's find out how does the traffic manager work. So this is a pretty interesting diagram. It's from Microsoft's anyways. So let's think about this. You're the user and you are trying to go to rangerweb.cloudranger.net. It's a basic web app or website that you have created in Azure. Um, Actually, now that I'm saying that it's a website created in Azure, I want to go back to this slide and tell you one more thing. These are two websites. You have to remember that these are, I'm depicting this diagram in such a way that these two are showing that they are Azure websites. But technically, these endpoints can also be hybrid. So this could be in Azure, and this actually could be your on-premise IIS server. Okay, and or this could be Azure website, same content, but this is somewhere in Azure East, and this is somewhere in Azure Australia, somewhere in that location. So this could be there is a geographical thing in consideration in here as well. So you could technically have a hybrid scenario where you are load balancing your traffic, which is on premise, to something else that's in the cloud. And I'll talk about those scenarios. I just wanted to make sure that you understand that this is not necessarily always in Azure. One of these endpoints, or if there are more endpoints, some of them could be on premise, some of them could be on cloud, and this could be a very well hybrid scenario. Anyways, so let's go back to this slide, and I want to talk about the working of how Azure Traffic Manager actually is working. So when you are requesting this website, rangerweb.cloudranger.net, obviously by the URL you can figure out this is an Azure website. The first thing you are actually doing is going and querying the DNS. This is public DNS uh, to figure out that where exactly you are going, rangerweb.cloudranger.net. This is how the traffic in internet works. We all know that. It's going to point you to, it's going to translate to an IP address or something, and it's going to take you to the server. So in the Azure Traffic Manager, when you request to the DNS, what DNS is going to do is it will go and look up that address. So as you can see, cloudranger.net, this is my custom domain. This is my personal domain where I'm putting a subdomain Ranger Web. So I have an entry there, a CNAME entry, which is basically pointing to something called rangerweb-tm.trafficmanager.net. Okay, so when I created my traffic manager, this is the domain it will give us, trafficmanager.net. And this is basically just the profile name of the domain name I provided. And TM over here basically stands for Traffic Manager. So it's easy for me to understand what this is. So when you request the DNS to go to rangerweb.cloudranger.net, it's translating to rangerweb-tm.trafficmanager.net. So when it translates to this address, the DNS basically points you to the traffic manager, which is actually created in Azure Cloud. So now that the traffic is gone there, Traffic Manager now selects where do you have to go to. So as you can see over here, I have two cloud services, I have two websites. Whatever the resources it may be, Traffic Manager will pick up one of these resources and it's going to reply back through that DNS the IP address to your client computer. Okay. Once you have got that IP address for that endpoint, you now are going to directly talk with the resource. And if you actually had a website, this is the website or this is the server you will be, and you'll be looking at the resources. So any further requests that you are going to have, you won't be coming through this whole DNS thing because you already have the answer for the query of the DNS. So you'll be dealing with this server directly. And you'll be dealing with this server or this website directly till the DNS actually expires. So there is a TTL, a time to live value that you set when you create the traffic manager to make sure that you are going to only this server or this website till that certain period of time. After that, when you query this website, it will actually go through the DNS process again. So like I mentioned in my previous slide, that as complicated as this looks, end of the day, this is more of a DNS thing. The DNS sort of decides, where you need to go, and once you hit the traffic manager, it does its own thing. Now, the subsequent traffic, and I just mentioned that the subsequent traffic does not go through Traffic Manager any longer. Once the reply has been provided by the Traffic Manager, you don't come to the Traffic Manager or go through the Traffic Manager to do anything. It basically just provides you the DNS entry to the website, the one that will serve you directly. So unlike traditional load balancers where the traffic actually flows through the load balancer to the site and flows back in and out of the load balancer, this is not the typical case. So Traffic Manager is definitely not your typical load balancer. So a lot of things like, hey, how much of a bandwidth is going to pass through this, or how much of a traffic or concurrent connections this supports. Those are typical load on-premise load balancer questions you ask. And in this case, you don't because it forwards that DNS reply, and after that, you are connecting to the website directly. Okay, and like I mentioned, over here, for example, this website and this website would probably have the same content. So it doesn't matter if you hit here, some other user will probably hit here, and they will all have the same content. And you know, end of the day, they'll be load balanced, or this will work as a failover. So, for example, if for some reason this region or location was not able to serve the requests, Traffic Manager will work out and sort of take this endpoint out of that equation and say that, hey, from now on, this is the only active one. Those are pretty much same as on-premise load balancers, where it queries the endpoints and figures out if that endpoint is up and running. And I'm going to discuss that in great details momentarily. So don't worry about that. Here, I just wanted to give you an overall picture of how Traffic Manager works. And trust me, guys, I mean, as complicated as this looks, once we start configuring it, it's very, very simple. Now, before I move to the next slide, I have a quick thing to discuss here. When I say over here that these are two separate websites with same content, I'm talking about a regular web page. For example, the web pages with the websites we have been creating, which says static content of hello world or whatever. Those are easy websites to create. Now, what happens if you actually create a web app or like a web application which connects to the database and does everything? You have to take those in considerations. This is an Azure website topic right now. You have to make sure if it's a data-driven website that both this website here can access that data and this website as well can access that data. And if you're writing anything to the database, then that should be replicated, and this website should also be able to access those data, right? So if you are the web design, I mean the web application developer, you still have to take care of those things for yourself, like the database connectivity and everything. You want to make sure that you have all of that taken care of. Okay, with a static web page, this is not too it's not too hard to do, but when it's a web application, data driven and all that, there are a lot of other considerations. End of the day, traffic manager point of view or traffic manager concept, we don't care how you're going to do that. All traffic manager cares about is how the traffic is going to be directed. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next slide and actually see how to create a traffic manager profile and get started, and we can see what it can do. And I'll give you a step-by-step instruction on how this is done. So the first thing first, you have to make sure that you are first deploying the endpoint. Oops. So the endpoints that you deploy, like I mentioned, it could be cloud services, it could be websites, it could be on Azure, like this is a website on Azure, and this website probably could be located somewhere on premise, IIS server, but you can use Traffic Manager to load balance this stuff. So you want to make sure that these endpoints or these resources are first created. So if you are going to load balance Azure websites, make sure the websites are first created. That's where I'm trying to get to. Then after that, you have to decide on a DNS name for your Traffic Manager profile. So this is the first thing you do in Traffic Manager is you create a Traffic Manager profile. And this profile name has to be unique. The reason it has to be unique is because as soon as you create the Traffic Manager profile, it tries to slap on a trafficmanager.net domain name. This is same as those, the Azure websites domain name. So you have to make sure that it's actually unique for anything to happen. So you figure out the DNS name. So for my case, I will put in, for example, Ranger Web-TM, and it will sort of attach that with that. And at this point, you want to also, look at how while creating the profile, you have to look into how the endpoints are going to be monitored. So Traffic Manager needs to find out that if these are the two websites that are there, which website is up or which one is, which one to send traffic to. So the way Traffic Manager does that, and we'll look those up in configurations when you do that, there are ways it will find out if that website is up and running or not. So for example, it will go to this HTTP port and see if it gets a reply. So we'll have to decide on monitoring configuration, while we are creating the traffic manager profile. The next thing you have to look at is deciding on the load balancing method. The reason you have to worry about the load balancing method is because there are three different load balancing methods that Traffic Manager provides you. Okay, we'll get into those later and which one you'll be using at what scenario. We'll talk about that in a bit. But just remember that you have to tell that how the traffic is going to be distributed. For example, is it going to be round robin or is it going to be performance or something like that? Okay, so you have to decide that as well. Then you create the traffic manager profile. Now that you have all this information, you create the profile. Then you test the traffic manager profile and we'll decide, I mean, this is very insignificant and I'll show you how to, test that out. And after all of this is done, the main goal of the traffic manager is actually having your custom domain to actually get to a website. I mean, you are not going to give this domain to your clients or your users, right? I mean, you're going to give it something more customized, more, you know, it's more oriented to focus on your company. So, for example, I'm cloudranger.net, so my website will be called rangerweb.cloudranger.net, and you have to go to your public DNS and create a CNAME record to the traffic manager's domain over here. Once that's done, you're pretty much set and good to go. Um, Once this resolves to trafficmanager.net. So, end of the day, some of you might have guessed this by now. This actually is like what we call a, a, a VIP in load balancer, right? I mean, it's a virtual IP. So technically, when you hit that virtual IP, it figures out which other IP to go to based on the configuration of load balancer or how it's going to load balance. So technically, this is that VIP, not the Azure VIP. This is totally different. If it's a load balancer, it's the virtual IP, right? So it's basically a virtual IP which is already given a domain name with your hostname.trafficmanager.com or your profile name.trafficmanager.com, .net. Okay, so this has to be unique. So when you create the traffic manager profile, this name absolutely has to be unique. Okay, so let's actually move on. Coming through this slide, so all those steps that I talked about, they could be consolidated to like 3 points, really, like 3 steps. You create the traffic manager profile, you add the endpoints, and you update the DNS records. Those are the only 3 things you have to do. Traffic manager profile creation, adding the endpoints, updating your public DNS. So end of the day, that's all is required to make the Azure Traffic Manager. So I've simplified those and put it in 3 points. So let's actually talk about creating a profile. When you're creating the profile, like I just mentioned, you have to select unique DNS, and there is going to be a TTL. I'll explain that TTL in a little bit details in a bit. And you are setting the load balancing method. And the 3 load balancing, and this is what we'll discuss right now, are performance, round robin, and failover. Okay, so let's talk about performance. The way this performance works is that let's assume you created a website in Azure East location. And you created one in, for example, Azure Japan location. You are probably doing it in, I mean, you're giving so much of a geographical distance in there because you're thinking of DR and everything. You upload the same content to these both websites, right? So the way performance will work is that if you are in North America, so you are closer to US East location. So your traffic will basically go to the website that's in US East, if you're in Canada or USA or Mexico, whatever, because you are geographically closer. Okay, so you are having a better performance by going to a data center that's located in North America. Now, if you are somewhere in Asia and you are trying to go to the site, Azure will be like, hey, you know what? You are closer to a data center that's in Asia, in Japan. So rather than having you go all the way to the North American, location, I'm going to just let you go to the Japanese location, and you can go to, I mean, you can go there and get all the information. Okay, so that's how the load balancing works if it's based on performance. Now, round robin, you're very familiar with, right? Round robin, this was more like a general randomized way of throwing you between those two locations. It will find out, it'll randomly throw you on any one of them, and and you'll be attached to that location based on your TTL or the total time. Um, it total time till it expires. You'll always go to that server. Okay, so you could be in Canada, and for some reason it thought that it's okay to send you to the Japanese location. You will keep going there till it actually the DNS, the information that you have locally actually expires. So that's your round robin. Now, recently, what Azure did is with round robin, they kind of made it a little bit more complex. So you can actually have, for example, if you have 5 endpoints, um, rather than jumping in between them randomly, you can actually have weight. So you can assign weight to each endpoint, and the way the round robin will go is based on the weight. You can't do this, however, from the portals. You have to use the REST API or PowerShell to configure that. So round robin can actually be made a little bit more intelligent or complex than just randomized, bouncing between two servers. Okay. The last one is the failover method. With the failover, basically, you are assigning once one of the locations, so one of the sites that's saying that this is my primary site, and this is the one that's going to provide all the service, and you are still going to maintain a configured list of more backup services. So if this one fails, you're going to say, hey, if this fails, go to that next one, or go to the one after that. So these are the basic 3 methods of load balancing that Azure Traffic Manager provides. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the TTL here. So once Traffic Manager provides you the DNS information and say this is the IP address you're basically going to, or this is the location you're going to, this TTL is actually on the client or the end user side, right? Because your browser or your computer will hold the value of the DNS and how long, it's a cached value that it's going to hold till a certain amount of time that you can configure. Okay, so the reason you need the DNS TTL or the DNS TTL value is because every time you make a request to rangerweb.cloudranger.net, you don't want it to go and make that entire DNS query and resolve it. You want to basically hold that information in your computer. This is no different, actually, from a regular DNS query. So, for example, if you're going to Microsoft.com website or CloudRanger.net website, the very first time your browser goes there, it makes the DNS query, obviously. It will cache that, okay? So, just because this is so important DNS-wise, Traffic Manager um, is like so dependent on it, a TTL value is something they want you to configure. So you can say, hey, you know what? Once you go to the site, keep that DNS information with you for the next 5 minutes. I don't want you to make any more DNS query. But after 5 minutes, I want you to make that query again because, we need to make sure the traffic is balanced and, you know, send you to a server that should be the one that should be sending you all this information. Now, there is a concern here, and I kept thinking about this, and it's something I want to research more into. So let's assume you are going to node A, and you are like Traffic Manager is, like I mentioned earlier, tells you to go directly deal with node A. What will happen if you have a TTL for 5 minutes and you go to node A and for some reason the node A went down, but you will keep going to node A and not make a new DNS query because that's the TTL. For 5 minutes, you're not going to make any new DNS query. You're going to node A only to find out that you're getting a 404 error, page cannot be found, or internal server error like an error 500 because the service is not up and running or whatever. So The only way you'll know if that node is working or not is if you actually had made a DNS query and went to Traffic Manager. Like I mentioned, because Traffic Manager will constantly check if the endpoints are up and running or not. If it finds out that node A was not working, it's not going to give you a direction to node A because it will take it out of the pool. But at the same time, because of your this TTL, you're not even going to Traffic Manager. So there's a little concern there, and you want to be very careful that this TTL is therefore not for a very, very long amount of time. And I mean, of course, this TTL helps you with the DNS query latency and stuff like that, but you have to be sort of little careful. Um, and you know, if you have this, like for example, TTL for 10 minutes and node A went down, some of your users who all were connecting to node A will be waiting for the next 9 or 10 minutes for it to fail over because you are not going to Traffic Manager for that long. So if you want the failover to be really quick, you want to make sure that this is a lower value, okay? And this is something research into and find out that what's good for your environment, what kind of appetite you have for failover, and how long you're okay with your end users not having a service in case of a failure. Okay. So that's all the theory I had for Azure Traffic Manager. Now let's like jump right into hands-on proper doing this from scratch. So I'm going to create the sites and I'm going to create the Traffic Manager profile and go through all the settings. Please follow along and get this thing going. Okay. The only thing is that I actually have my cloudranger.net, that CNAME record already put in there. Because sometime it may take time for you to enter that in your public DNS for your domain name, and it can take a couple of hours even to propagate, though these days it doesn't take that long, but certain times it can. If you cannot do that because you don't have a domain name or something like that, just follow along anyways, because that's just the CNAME really. So, I mean, it's not a big deal, but ideally in your production environment, you will be doing this with proper custom domain names, okay? So let's get started. Alrighty, so I am in my Cloud Rangers account here. I'm at the preview portal. Let's go to browse everything. There's no resource to display as I expected because I always clean up everything after I'm done with my lab. So let's go ahead and create a website real quick, okay? And by now, I'm going to do this so it's like a fully contained lab, but I'm pretty sure that you know what I'm doing here very well by now. Let this load up. So let's go ahead and create a site. I'm going to call this Ranger Web USA. It's available .azurewebsites.net. So I need to create a new plan. I'm going to call this Ranger USA plan. Okay. Now let's look at the pricing tier, and this is something you have to remember for your exams. So I'm going to go view all, well, exams and production, right? As you can see, not all tiers will provide you with Traffic Manager. So free does not have it. The shared tier does not have it either. The basic tier does not have Traffic Manager either. So you can only start from the standard tier where you'll see the Traffic Manager is available. Okay. Obviously, premium has everything. So you have to be at least standard tier to make use of the Traffic Manager. Okay, let's create a resource group. Ranger is to resource group. I'm going to just name that. Pin to start, but I'm taking that out. Location, my first location is going to be East US 2. Okay, I think we are good here. Let's create that site. And I'm going to create another one. So basically, I'm going to have two locations, right? That's what I'm trying. You could have more. At this point, you could, if you wanted something like a hybrid, you probably wouldn't have to do anything. You just want to make sure that the website that I'm creating right now has the same content as the one on premise, and you'd let as your traffic manager balance between both. So since I'm not going to do a hybrid scenario here, I'm going to do both in Azure, but I'm going to do this in completely different location. Okay, so Azure web app, and you know, I'm going to call this Ranger Web. Let's try Japan. Okay, the plan will be Ranger Japan plan. Tier, standard tier. This will be Ranger Japan resource group. That's how I'm going to name this. Correct subscription. Let me get the location, which is in Japan. I'm going to make it Japan East. Okay, pin to start board. Let's create this. So I'm going to pause and come back once everything is created. Alrighty, looks like both my sites are created. So let's go to browse everything. And I should see two sites here, Ranger Web Japan and Ranger Web USA. Alrighty, so let's go and do something like this. I want to come down here to web apps. It'll actually sort this out proper. Okay, so let's go to Ranger Web USA. I want to go to that URL. It's up and running. rangerwebusa.azurewebsites.net. It should be a blank one, and this one will be for Japan. I think is the Ranger Web Japan URL. Waiting for it to load. Go over there. This should be created. This should be created as well. So I want you to look at these two endpoints. These are now called endpoints because now we are going to talk about traffic managers. So these are the two endpoints. This is Ranger Web USA and this is Ranger Web Japan. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to create content for these websites, and we're going to upload it. And obviously, I want to create and put the same content on both because it has to be the same content for my end users. Doesn't matter where they are from. So I have already Visual Studio open over here. So let's go to File, Create New Website. Okay. In Create New Website, what we are going to do is my first one is going to be well, this is just going to be Ranger Web, I guess, because it's going to be the same content. So I'm going to just call it Ranger Web. Okay, it's an empty website, so that's what will be created first. Alrighty. So let's go to Ranger Web, and over here we want to add new item. So basically an HTML page that I'm going to add. I'm going to call it default. So this is going to be the first page, .html. So I'm going to do something interesting here, okay? I'm going to say hello world, and that's my web page, okay? I want all my users. I'm going to add one more line here just for me to understand that, which server am I, landing onto. So I'll just say this one is from USA, so from USA location. So ideally, if this was my content, that's where I'll end. I'm just adding this in parentheses here to just let me know which location it's going to. Okay, so let's go ahead and publish this on the USA website. So let's come over here, and this is how it's going to look, right? So let's hit on the Internet Explorer here. It's going to best be like hello world from USA location. You know what? I'm going to put a line break here. That's what I'm going to do. So it goes to the next line. Perfect. Okay, so let's go publish this on the USA side. So let's go to publish website, Microsoft Azure websites. I'm already logged into Cloud Ranger blog. I think it's going to ask me for my password. Let's go ahead and put that in there. Alrighty, so my existing websites should show both of them. The one that I want to publish to right now is Ranger Web USA. Click OK. Validate connection. I just do this for, sanity check. I know everything should work out. Go to next, next, start a preview. I want to see the files that are going to be uploaded. Default and web.config. Okay, so let's go ahead and publish this. And this is going to Ranger Web USA. Okay. Okay, let's go and click on refresh. Hello world from USA location because this is Ranger Web USA. I just want to mention that I'm putting the from US location for me because we'll be load balancing this. I just want to demonstrate that which server or which location is going to. But ideally, that's all should be my content because my end users should not know that they're on a totally different location or different server. They should not even care if it's on premise or on cloud. Nothing. This is just for our benefit for the demonstration purpose. So similarly, what I'm going to do is come over here, take the same page and do a from Japan location. And this one I'm going to publish to the Japan site. So let's go previous, Microsoft Azure websites, Japan. Okay. So checked everything. You can see it already picked up the right URL for Japan. Just waiting for it to give us an indication that everything is all right. Okay. Click on next, next, start preview. It should show us those two pages, those two files, default, publish. So now this should be published in the Japan location. All right, the publish has started. So we are in Ranger Web Japan. Let's click on refresh. All right, so we have both the websites up and running right now with the same content, and I am putting in the locations to show which side it ends up on. So at this point, this was the first step where our endpoints are created. The sites are created. These two endpoints are good to go. The next thing is now we want to look into is creating the actual profile. Now, one thing over here, if you click on new and you go to networking, because it's part of networking in Azure, you go to traffic manager here, you'll find that we are working on adding this service from here. So the preview portal does not allow you yet to do the traffic manager stuff. Okay. For this, you need to go back to the management portal. So you need to come to manage the Windows Azure.net. This is the portal where you are going to do the traffic manager on. They're working on it. So by the time you're probably watching this video, they might have already, gone and done that. But right now, so far, they haven't. So let's go to the traffic manager. What is the first thing we want to do? Well, we want to create a traffic manager profile, right? So let's go ahead and create the traffic manager profile. And guys, this is very simple. All the theory, if it confused you, looking over here, you'll see that this is so easy. So the first thing was to create the unique name because now trafficmanager.net is going to be the unique domain name for those sites, and that's the domain name you are going to put it as CNAME on your public DNS. So if you recall, I think I remember Ranger, what was it? Ranger Web -tm. I love doing this on my traffic manager because then I can look at this and I know that this is my domain that's pointing to my traffic manager. Okay. It's asking you what's going to be your load balancing method. I'm going to put it as performance because I feel that's the most that's the right thing to do under my circumstances because I want to show you that whenever I go to that, we are always hitting the USA location. Perhaps round robin or failover might be a more preferred method for yours. You can try everything out depending on your research on what your organization wants. I'll just leave it with performance and I'm going to hit on create. This takes, this is like, as you saw, it happens right away. So by default, when it starts, the status is inactive. Remember that for exam, remember that for production. It's not that the traffic manager is not working. The reason it's inactive is because you might have guessed we do not have the endpoints pointed yet. we have created the endpoints, but we have never told anywhere what are the endpoints that are going to be for the traffic managers. We just created the traffic manager, and that's all we did. So let's go to the endpoints tab here, and you have to add the endpoints to the traffic manager profile. Right now, it does not have one. So let's create one. It's giving you the options. So there is a cloud service option or web app. We know that our endpoint is actually a web app. So let's go to the web app. And it's showing you that these are the two endpoints that you currently have. And you can see a little warning here, only standard web apps are eligible, and we know that ours is standard. Okay, so let's go ahead and put those two endpoints. We need both of them. Hit this, and we'll just wait for this to happen. As you can see, it's checking the endpoint. So it's actually checking at this point if the endpoints are up or not. And I'll explain in a little bit, when I'm talking about the monitoring, that what it's actually doing. So let's, I guess I'll pause the video and come back when this is done. Alrighty, took about good 5 minutes before I was wondering why is this taking such a long time, and I realized that how much this portal was buggy, and I went and refreshed the page, and obviously after I came back, it showed everything is online. So right now, the traffic manager profile has been created, and we have added the endpoints, and the endpoints show that both of them are up and running. They're both web apps, and this is the location. So technically, at this point, you are done. All you have to do is take this address and go to the browser, paste that, and go there. Alrighty. So depending on which part of the world you are, since this is based on performance, it is showing that we ended up hitting the US server. That's why it's hello world, and East US 2, that's where we are. I'm closest to, that's where it is. Okay, if you are somewhere in Asia, if you went and hit this web address, you'd probably get that. And there's an interesting way. I'm just trying to think if I should do that now. You know what? For the sake of demonstration, I'll do that. Let's go here. I'm going to create a virtual machine real quick. I'm going to cheat the system a little bit. I'm just going to call this Ranger VM001 or something. Guess that's taken. Ranger VM0001. Okay. Make this a A2 size. What I want to do is I'm going to put this somewhere in Japan. Actually, let's do something more interesting just for the sake of demonstration. I'm going to just put this somewhere in Southeast Asia, not exactly in Japan. What I'm going to do by now, if you did not guess, is that I'm going to create this VM and try to go to this URL from that VM. Since this VM is being created somewhere in Southeast Asia and Japan is sort of the closest data center, this should show us the Japan page based on the performance of the load balancer, right? Because our parameter was based on performance. So that'll be the closest one. Let's do that. So let's create the virtual machine. While this virtual machine is being created, let's go and talk a little bit more about the traffic manager. So the traffic manager is online. Come over here. These are our endpoints. Come on, load now. I want to go to Configure tab and talk about a couple more things. Okay, so this is the DNS name, and we have given that when we were creating the profile. This is the DNS time to live, the TTL. So the browser is going to wait up to 30 seconds before it actually goes to the traffic manager again to query the whole DNS thing and do it. Right now, my browser says you should be going to the US location, so it now goes directly to the website that's in USA. It does not go to the traffic manager and query at least for 300 more seconds, right? After that, it will go to the traffic manager again and do the query, and traffic manager will tell it where to go. Our load balancing method is based on performance. There's obviously the round robin and failover, which you can change at any time. The one that I want to consider over here and talk about is the monitoring settings. So the way the traffic manager actually knows if an endpoint is up and running or not is by periodically going and querying port 80 for the root page. So what happens if the website actually comes up? Some of you might actually know this already. Every time you go to a web page and the web page actually loads, it actually gets an HTTP protocols code 200, which is pretty much okay. So Azure Traffic Manager will go to port 80 and try to load that page in the backend. As soon as it gets 200 as a reply, it says that, hey, I'm good to go. This endpoint is good, and it will know it's healthy, and it will provide a little checkbox here, and this means that the load balancer will go and pick up either one of them to show you the content or provide you the service. If for whatever reason it goes there and finds something like a 404, means a page not found, or it goes and finds that it's any other code besides 200, it knows that something is wrong. Okay, so if it gets the internal error like 500 or 404, as long as it's not 200, it will know that something is wrong, and it will take that node out of the pool. So when users actually go to this page, go to this URL, they will not be able to go there. Okay, that's how Traffic Manager actually finds out if a node is healthy or not. Now, there's something interesting here. We know that it's going to go to the root page, in our case, the default.html, and it will get a code 200. But that's just the web page. What if the database server, this was a data-driven website, and the database server was down? Well, what you can do is you can create a little bit of your logic. Okay, some of you who have worked with System Center, you probably might know this. I can do something over here called health.aspx or something like that. What now the load balancer or the traffic manager will do is go to this web page. And the logic of this web page you can program or develop too is like, hey, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to go and make sure if the database is working, if all the resources I need is working, then I'm going to display the page. If one of those things are not working, I'm not going to display this page. So Traffic Manager will not care. Traffic Manager just wants this page to be displayed. It wants that code 200. As long as it gets the code 200, it will be like it's good to go. If it finds anything besides 200, it will be like, I am going to take this offline. So based on your code in health.aspx or whatever.aspx, you can create the logic yourself to not provide the 200 reply to Traffic Manager. So Traffic Manager will know when to take that node out. So you can have some complex logic here that, hey, I'm going to make a connection to the database and make a query. If that query doesn't work, I'm not going to show this page. 200 code is not going to be offered to Traffic Manager. Traffic Manager will take that out of the pool. So this can get pretty interesting, and you can actually make this quite robust based on that. For our case, we'll just leave it the way it is right now, okay? So let's go to the endpoints here, and we will see that both of them are up and running. Let me see how's my VM doing here. Yeah, it's almost there. I really want to demonstrate that because you know what? I can create refresher, click refresher as much as possible. It will always query and bring me over here because our load balance method is set on performance. So it's looking for the closest proximity or closest data center. When the VM is created, since it's in Asia, I'm expecting it to be Japan. Okay, so I'll come back when this is done. I'll log into the system as well, and I'll just bring it just before I fire up the browser. Alrighty, so I am logged into my Ranger VM 001.cloudapp.net. Just to remind you, this is actually located in Southeast Asia, so it's in the Asian continent. Technically, based on our calculation, the traffic manager will actually take us to the Japan's location. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's fire up the browser. I'm going to go copy this traffic manager's URL. Let's go here, expand this a little bit, put the URL here. So I'm putting the same URL, okay? So moment of truth, let's hit enter. Alrighty, look at this. This actually went to the site that's in Japan. And the reason being, this VM being in Asia, the closest was not our US East 2 location, but the Japan location, so it went to Japan. So traffic manager was smart enough to, let this guy know that, hey, you are closest to Japan's location, so go over there. So if you actually have a global site, you could have your endpoints at different locations of various parts of this world, and you could have your customers go to the closest one that's to them, right? So if you're in UK, you could have one over there. If you're in Australia, have one over there. Like put it in the data centers where you can have, I mean, your customers will most likely come from, and this will be totally a global thing, and traffic manager will figure out where to send the traffic to. So it's not really a dumb uh, basic load balancer. This actually does your geo load balancing based on performance. Of course, I mean, you could forget all of that and, make the load balancer just based on round robin or failover, and you can point it to very specific locations. It all depends on where and what you want to do, right? Based on your website's requirement and stuff like that. The next thing I want to show you is actually disabling one of that node. So for example, this Ranger Web USA was your on-premise one, and you wanted to take it down for doing some maintenance or server update or something. You can always disable that. So let's go ahead and disable this endpoint. So once this is disabled, what will happen, and let's check this out, right? We want to come over here and hit on refresh. I want you to notice this carefully. Let's do a control F5 because it's probably cached. So let me take this down. I'm going to delete all my cache here just in case. Okay, history is gone. You know what? Fire up a new browser. Let's go to, nothing is there, so we need our URL. So let's go to .url and get it from here. Traffic manager. I need this URL. Copied. Let's go here. Let's go here. Control V. Try that. See, it's still going to the US location because one, it's cached. Even if we remove the cache, the DNS is still pointing us to that US location, but our DNS is still cached. That has nothing to do with Internet Explorer's cache. So we are not going to the traffic manager any longer and asking it, hey, is this guy still up and running? So there is no way for us to know if this guy was really down or not based on the TTL. So rather than making it 300 seconds, if I did something like 60 seconds, which would be like more like a minute, we could probably find out and go to Japan right now from our browser, even if we are in North America, because that node is not there. So if we give this enough time and our DNS expires, we should be able to see that it actually makes the new query and goes to the new location. The other thing is, let's actually try to delete the cache ourselves for DNS. So let's run our command prompt as an admin, and we can do ipconfig-flush DNS. Let's see how this works. Nah, it still has it cached. You know what I'm going to do? Let's do ipconfig-flush DNS. I'm going to open up the in private browsing, so I know nothing is cached in here. I know 300 seconds have passed. I paused a little bit, so let's try the location and see where we go. All right, there you go. It's actually taking us to the Japan location, and this is not the VM, right? I'm on my client computer, and it's still taking me to Japan location. The reason being is that, well, one, I did like a flush DNS and purged my DNS, and it went to the traffic manager, and it found out that the US location was actually disabled. Means for some reason I took off that node and it couldn't go. So even if I'm not in any location that's close to the Japan data center, it knows that the US is down and it's taking me there. So what I'm trying to basically try to say here or demonstrate is that the TTL that we had over here actually does matter quite a bit. Okay, all those users for almost 300 seconds where still, even if we disable the endpoint, well, we're still going to that endpoint. Okay, so you probably want this to be something low, not something super low that where it's affecting performance, but something like 60 seconds would be just fine. Okay, so it's important for you to know that. The thing I want to tell you is that I am using this URL. Obviously, this is not the URL you are going to give your users. You're going to take this and create a CNAME, like you do something like ranger website dot traffic manager dot net. I mean, ranger website dot cloudranger.net or whatever web.yourdomainname.com.net.org or dot whatever these days, and you want to create a CNAME to this one and provide that to your users. And you have to also remember that while you are doing that, I in my previous sessions, I showed that how to add a custom domain to your traffic websites. You still need to do that. The reason you need to do that is because when you hit the site directly, right? Because you're not going through Traffic Manager right after you got the DNS stuff. You are hitting the site directly. The site needs to have that information. So I'll just show you real quick what I mean by this one. You go to over here, the US one over here. I want to go into all settings, and you want to go to custom domain and SSL. You want to make sure that the custom domain over here, managed domain, is actually brought in, right? Bring external domain and go through that process. And if you're not going to do that, then there's going to be a little bit of an issue. Already you can see over here ranger web-tm was utilized, so you have to assign the custom domain over here. Not just adding the CNAME is not going to work. You still have to add the custom domain, and that's how it will work. And you have to do that for both of them, since or as many endpoints you have. In my case, I just have 2, so I would have to add that for both Japan and USA to make sure that it's authorized to do so. Okay, now that this all is done, it's it's almost close to an hour, so I'm trying to wrap this up real quick. All of that can be done from PowerShell. You almost thought you got away with it. Well, it's very important for exams as well as production if you're going to do this in a script or whatever. So I'll go through this real quick. The basic things you have to remember is new Azure Traffic Manager profile, right? I mean, the profile is the one you create. You give the name of the profile. This has to be unique. And this is going to be the domain name. So this is the profile name and this is the domain name. This one has to be unique. And you have to tell what load balancing method it's going to be. For this example, I put round robin. The monitor protocol, you remember the monitor protocol was port HTTP, port 80, and it was the relative path. And this was the TTL over here. I'm just putting 30 seconds, so something really fast. So the commandlet is new Azure Traffic Manager profile. So once you do that, once that's created, you want to take the profile variable here. So get Azure Traffic Manager profile, and you're putting the name of the profile and you're saving it in a variable. What I'm trying to do here is now add the endpoints. And the way you do that is add Azure Traffic Manager endpoint. Okay, so I'm taking that, I'm saying that add that endpoint to this profile, the profile that I just got here. So put the profile, and this is the domain name, right? These are the 2 domain names I had, Ranger Web USA, and I'm just saying it's a website, and by default, status is going to be enabled. Once all that is done, you need to pipe it to set Azure Traffic Manager profile. So you have to remember that. Add Azure Traffic Manager endpoint and set Azure. So you're adding that endpoint and you're setting that to Traffic Manager profile. Do the same with the Japan one, or do I had 2. If you have 4 or 5, do all of them. Once all of them are done, you need to. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Um, there's one thing I want to show here is, yeah. So if you wanted to, disable one of these, I'm trying to look for that commandlet. Actually, that is the commandlet. What I missed here was, let's see. I want to put over here status. and I'll make this status as disabled. Okay, so this is the script. I mean, this is the commandlet. What I'm saying is that, just like I did over here, where I went and pretty much took off, made one of these endpoints go disabled, the way you do the disable would be through this commandlet here. Okay. In our case, let's actually try one of this. We know that US1 is disabled, so let's enable that. So the way you do that here is I'm going to take the US endpoint and I'm going to do an enabled one here. Okay, let's run this. And you're going to set that. So it's still set as your traffic manager endpoint, right? So after you have added that, you can always set that. Let's run that. Traffic manager profile because it's not. Yes, of course, because I have not run this one. It's looking for this variable. Let's get this variable first. What else is going to happen? Add Azure account. My thing has expired, so it needs to get that information. Cloud Ranger blog at hotmail.com. Sometimes I like these errors to happen so that way you can actually see what do you have to do when you get these errors. So sometimes I'm glad this happened. I actually wrote this script a while ago and left this open. So get Azure subscription. I want to make sure I'm on the right subscription. Yep, I am. So let's go ahead and run this commandlet first. Should run now. Okay. Now let's set the traffic manager endpoint. So I'm actually making the change on the endpoint directly. So we disabled it before. Let's enable it now. Alrighty, it says it's online. So if I come over here, refresh this page, it should show it's online. Let's wait for that to happen here. Go to Traffic Manager. Alrighty, as you can see, it's online now. So you can actually enable and disable each endpoints with set as your Traffic Manager endpoint. Okay. And the last commandlet is remove as your traffic manager profile. If you run this, it removes everything in the profile. You are not going to lose your endpoint, so your websites are still going to be there. All it does is takes out the traffic manager profile here. So I'm going to have this script somewhere posted with this video, so you can actually later look at this, or you can pause this video and pretty much just take the commandlets. It's one if you. The blog site will have a link to this actually. So that's all that there is to Traffic Manager. Let's go back to our slides. I know it's been a long video and there was quite a bit to absorb, but this is the last slide, I promise. So there's one thing called as nested profiles, okay? So what you can do is you can do something much, much more complex with Traffic Manager. So far I have told you that Traffic Manager could have endpoints such as web apps or cloud services. It can actually have one more endpoint as well, which is another traffic manager profile. So one traffic manager will point to another traffic manager, which will have its own endpoints. Okay, so it can do something like this, that the first traffic manager profile you have created 4 sites, and for whatever reason, you actually have another traffic managed profile here, which load balance to its own endpoints. Okay, so there are times where people will actually not go to the websites but hit another traffic manager profile and do something like this. I'm going to actually give you a very practical scenario for this. Okay, think about this. You have a multinational global website which does a lot of stuff, and you want it to do something different. When you are in North America, somewhere in Canada, for example, I'm in Canada. So if you're in Canada, you want it to load balance between all these sites, okay? Because these sites are sort of the ones that are based for the North American or Canadian customers. And you load balance this based on performance. What have we learned based on performance? We have learned that performance will be based on the proximity to data center. So if you are in North America, you will hit these four sites because these four sites will be, you know, in different locations, US East, US West, US East 2, all these locations here. But for your customers from Europe, you will actually have pointed to this endpoint, which is actually a traffic manager profile by itself. And these sites will be the ones that are actually load balanced for the European customers. So what you have just done is that you created a very robust multi site covered web page or website for your customers. So the North American customers will always go to these websites. The European customers will always go to these websites, and each of them are load balanced. So that's a very practical real life scenario where you would actually have a traffic manager profile nested in another traffic manager profile to do something like that. Uh, uh, there's not a whole lot of example for this online, but this is one of the reasons you would actually be using something like this. Okay, so it's not just something fancy. Azure has thought of a lot of things, and it thought that, hey, if you're going to come and use the cloud service and you have a mega global or website which caters to a lot of customers, and you want to hit them based on proximities, you can do those things. Okay, so that was one of those examples. I hope it kind of made sense to you, but it's a real life scenario that actually clients do. Alrighty, so that's all that there is to Azure Traffic Manager for now. If you have any questions, obviously dump them on the YouTube comments. I'll try to answer or send me an email. I'm trying to catch up on my emails, but I'm all caught up with the comments on YouTube channel. Okay, so as usual, the training site is at cloudranger.net/Azure-training. The YouTube, this is where you're viewing it most likely, is at Cloud Ranger Network. Twitter is at Cloud Ranger Blog, and email is sean@cloudranger.net. Alrighty, thank you for viewing, and I will be seeing you in the next session.